Hey guys, this is Chaos Chrono, back with another display opening. We're on to number 5 for the AOA display openings. So far we've been getting a couple of interesting decks, but nothing too crazy yet. But yeah, let's get this opened up and check out what we got. As usual, as we speed through the unboxing portion, just want to shout out my team podcast, Team ESP. You can find us on Spotify and YouTube. Other than that, I hope you all have been enjoying playtime, whether it's on the Crucible or in person at locals if it's available where you're at. But without further ado, let's see what we got in these decks. The first deck we've got is Z Copper, I'll call it. Beckhope's Scavenger Centurion. It's a Mars Shadows Untamed deck. Looking at Amber generation, we have 10 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Harvester, Swindle, 2 Throwing Stars, 2 Umbra, Darna, 2 Full Moon, Rustnar, and Soldiers to Flowers. So I'm estimating about 20 for Amber generation, but it can definitely go higher than that. For Amber control, we have Swindle and 2 Umbras. Key cost control and forging control include Nizic Resonator and Miasma. And other supporting cards include 2 Shockworm and Gravit Cycle. Total Amber control I'm rating about a 5. For artifact control, we have a Rustnar, so that gives us 0.5. For creature control, we have Exterminate, 2 Life for Lives, 2 Throwing Stars, Special Delivery, Save the Pack, and They're Everywhere for direct removal. We finally have that combo between Save the Pack and They're Everywhere, so that's nice. Supporting cards include Collector Worm, 2 Shockworms, Zorg, Lethal Distraction, and Gravit Cycle. So the total creature control I'm rating about an 8. For speed, there's nothing that really affects draw or play or archiving, so I'm going to rate it base 0, but there are cards that help make it more efficient, like Combat Pheromones, Dust Witch, Song of the Wild, and Gravit Cycle. So it can go up to about a 2 for speed, but overall there isn't direct correlation with draw or card cycling. Some highlights for this deck. It's a toolkit deck with good generation and creature control within AOA, so it has its potential, especially within the set. Other good things include creature targets for combat pheromones, such as Collector Worm, Vine Warper, Xanthix Harvester, so there's things you can use. We have Collector Worm in a deck that doesn't have archiving, which is good, so collect all the creatures that you want and never touch your archive again. The Killzord can go on to Mind Warper, Vesma Think Drone, Harvester, Darna, since you're going to be using their reap effects or action effects. We have Bad Penny with 2 Life for Lives, which makes Bad Penny useful in this deck, whereas most of the time I just feel like it's not very useful at all. We have Save the Pack and They're Everywhere. Just that combo is always nice to see. As for the bad of this deck, it is lacking Amber control and speed. It is missing a key cheat in Untamed, given that it can ramp up on Amber between Darna and Soldiers to Flowers. But other than that, the least useful cards are Vesma Think Drone, because we're not going to be archiving our own stuff, because there's really not that many play effects other than Darna, and Tentadlin, overall not the most useful creature in my opinion. So overall I'm going to rate this pretty high at a 65. Moving on to deck number 2, we have the SPC of Sleetville. It's a Brognar, Logos, and Mars deck. For Amber generation, we're looking at 15 pips of Amber. That's a lot of Amber. Supporting cards include Smith's Effect, Mars Needs Amber, and the Xanthix Harvester. So I'm going to rate the total Amber generation about 18. For Amber control, we are primarily looking at Burn the Stockpile and Mars Needs Amber, and along with Grunt Buggy, but there's only 4 big creatures in this deck. Supporting cards include 2 Shockworm and an Amber Conduction unit. So overall Amber control I'm looking at 3. For artifact control, we do have both a Neutron Shark and Destroy Them All, so that's a 2. Creature control, for direct removal, we have 2 copies of First Blood. Unfortunately, it's an alpha and I don't like to see double alphas. Pound, Phoenix Heart, Poke, Neutron Shark, Tixel Beam Buckler, Destroy Them All, Containment Field, and Zookeeper. Supporting cards include Calfine, Into the Fray, 2 Ogopogos, 2 Shockworms, along with the ACU or Amber Conduction unit. So for creature control, I'm going to rate it about a 10. For speed, we have Sound the Horns, but with only 3 creatures in Brobnar, that's going to be a little awkward. 2 copies of Igor, Helperbot, Poke, 3 Wall Wormholes, Dragoggle, Time Traveler, Mars first. For speed, I'm going to rate at about a 10 as well. Highlights, We have good Amber generation, creature control, and speed in this deck. It's easy to cycle, and we do have ways to remove the Grunt Buggy, so it might be a viable play to play it down, just to increase key costs for a little bit, and then take it out when we're ready to forge. We have Zookeeper in a deck without archiving, so it's same as the deck before with Collector Worm. It's nice that we're not archiving in logos here, so we can focus on keeping our opponent's cards locked up in our archive. The bad, we have below average creature count with the Smith, so it may or may not fire. It's going to be more situational rather than a guaranteed thing. Grunt Buggy with low power creature deck and a limited number of large creatures. Mars needs Amber without widespread damage source in Mars. The 2 Shockworms and the ACU is a little redundant, so it's a bit overkill in that respect, not that useful. While Wormhole can hit some things that we may not want it to hit, like in the case where our opponent's board is bigger than ours, we don't want to hit that Grunt Buggy, we don't want to play it out to begin with, or hitting it, destroy them all, and Neutron Shark in the wrong circumstances would be a bit awkward. And with 3 copies of Wild Wormhole, there's a bit higher chance that you're going to be in a situation where that is going to happen. So overall, this deck is going to play like a rush deck with a severe lack of Amber control, so you're really going to try to race your opponent to the 3 keys. And overall, SAS, I'm going to rate about a 62. For the third deck, we have Kjellsson of Stoneeig. It's a Brobnar Logos and Untamed deck. For Amber generation, we're looking at 7 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Cutthroat Research for its effect, Entropic Swirl, 2 copies of Full Moon, and Rustnar, totaling at about 10 Amber generation. For Amber control, we're looking at Groke and Cutthroat Research, so just the 2 cards. Supporting cards include Pose Pixies. For artifact control, we do have a Rustnar again, so that's going to be 0.5. For creature control, we're looking at Bramo, Coward's End, First Blood, Pound, Flamethrower, Gargantus Scrapper, Hebe the Huge, Lava Ball, Bouncing Death Quark, and Tropic Swirl. They're everywhere. With supporting cards like Into the Fray, Grovekeeper, Persistence Hunting, 2 copies of Pempeka Enga to power up creatures, and Calfine. So overall creature control is pretty high here at about 14. And for speed, we have for draw, play, or archiving, we have Helperbot, Labwork, Sutterkin, 2 copies of ZYX Researcher, Feel the Researcher, and Jar Goggle. Supporting cards, unfortunately, it's just a negative count, so it's Coward's End for 3 chains. Overall speed, I'm going to rate about an 8. For highlights, we do have good creature control and speed. Bouncing Death Quark with 21 creatures means we're going to have plenty of fodder to throw around, especially creatures that you want to recur, like ZYX Researcher. We have 2 copies of Full Moon with 7 untamed creatures with archiving in the deck, so we can definitely set up a big Full Moon turn. The unfortunate thing is we don't have a key cheat to go with that. As for the bad, we do have very little Amber generation overall and control, so while my estimates were definitely on the conservative side, it should definitely be higher than what I rated due to the full moons and potential Amber there. But even then, it's not that much Amber. So the other things problematic about this deck, the biggest house has the least creatures. The biggest house usually you want to have a strong hold on the board, but it doesn't have that many creatures. So in all, it's probably going to be the untamed house that's going to hold it down, especially with the 2 Angas to power up your creatures. We have Hebe the Huge that may destroy our own creatures, 7 of them possibly, every 2 power creature and 1 power creature. Though having Pempeka is going to be helpful in that it can prevent the destruction of those creatures by powering them up. We do have the anti-synergy from They're Everywhere with Hebe the Huge and Coward's End, but the positive side is your Hebe the Huge, which damaging your own side, can potentially help you keep your creatures alive in a Coward's End situation. We have 2 copies of Titan Mechanics with Cutthroat Research, which unfortunately are anti-synergistic as well, as they're going to lower the key costs, which doesn't help with what you need to do, which is increase key costs to make Cutthroat Research hit more frequently. So in summary, this is a quick board controlling deck with very little Amber controller generation that I'm going to rate about a 58. I will say though, Hebe the Huge is a legacy card, so that's a point of interest there. Moving on to deck number 4, we have the Protector that worries about spirits. It's a Brobnar, Sanctum, and Untamed deck. For Amber generation, we have 7 pips. Supporting cards include Healing Blast Effect, Free Markets, Darna, Amber Spy Mongrel, and Soldiers of Flowers for its effect. totaling about 14 for Amber Generation. For control, we do have Grok, Burn the Stockpile, and Board in the Redeemed, and key cost control and Grunt Buggy with 7 big creatures, native, with up to 15, and maybe all your creatures, with all the other creatures in here that give power to other creatures. Depending on how they're positioned, you can have upwards to all the creatures in your deck being powerful enough to count towards Grunt Buggy, which is pretty cool. And supporting cards include Stormeros and Amberswine Mongrel. So overall, the number of cards that can help, I'm going to only rate about a 5. But because Grunt Buggy is supported by so many creatures in this deck, it could very well perform higher than that, as long as your opponent cannot take away that Grunt Buggy. With artifact control, we do have Gorm of Om, so that's going to be a solid 1, which might come in handy if you ever need to remove Grunt Buggy, but I don't think that's going to be the case for this deck. For creature control, we do have Pound, Flamethrower, Gargantus Scrapper, Spirit's Way, and 2 copies of Save the Pack, which is going to unfortunately be a dead card because we don't have any widespread damage to put on the board to make use of Save the Pack, and there's 2 copies, so that's a little unfortunate. And Spirit's Way is a bit anti-synergistic since you're going to have a big board yourself, so that's going to wipe your own board. Supporting cards for creature control include Bingo Bang Bang, Tremor, 2 copies of Mugwump, Blind Boutram, 2 copies of Golden Aura, the Grey Rider, Potion of Vulnerability, Grove Keeper, and Pack Ega. All of it just playing into the support for fighting. Still, creature control is about a 5+. For speed, we have nothing that's impacting draw or play or archiving, but support cards include 2 Golden Auras, Grey Rider, Regrowth, Song of Spring, Soldiers of Flowers, all of them that help with efficiency, but not necessarily speeding up the cycling of the deck. So rating about 0 to 2. As for highlights, we have a big board that wants to stay in control, which is nice. Grunt Buggy with plenty of large creatures, so there's a lot of potential there. Lots of support for creatures on the board and cards like Golden Aura, Healing Blast, and whatnot. And the Golden Aura with Bingo Bang Bang is a nice combo that's found in this deck. As for the bad, the overall low numbers for all the stats of this deck, from Amber Generation, Amber Control, Creature Control, etc. Like every category is fairly low rated, so this is going to be a slow deck that you're going to really need to take control of the game and try to get your opponent on your pace. All 3 wipes in this deck don't want to be played. Save the Pack is kind of useless, and Spirit's Way is going to wipe your own stuff. So unfortunately, the Save the Pack is really going to haunt this deck. They're going to come into your hand and really they're just going to get chucked. In summary, it's a board-focused deck that's definitely afraid of wipes. If there's a deck that has a lot of removal that can keep up, this deck's going to have a tough time. So I'm overall going to rate this deck at a 59. Moving on to deck number 5, we have Gilbel, the Dignified Temple Baron. It's a Logos, Sanctum, and Untamed deck. For Amber Generation, we have 9 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Binate Rupture, 2 Darnas, Flaxia, and Soldiers of Flowers for its effect. Totaling at about 16 plus for Amber Generation, depending on how effective the Binate Rupture hits for and how many creatures you're getting rid of in Soldiers of Flowers. As you can see, there's a lot of untamed creatures. For Amber Control, we have Board in the Redeemed, Gatekeeper, Take Hostages with 3 copies of Smite that support it. Supporting cards negatively would be Binate Rupture since you're giving your opponent Amber. Then we have Stormeros and Bear So for Amber Control, I'm going to rate it about a 3. Artifact Control is going to be a 0 since there is none. Creature Control, we have 3 copies of Smite for direct removal, and the rest are support in terms of Radiant Truth, Hallowed Shield, Seraphic Armor, Grovekeeper, Persistence Hunting, Pempaga Anga, Inca the Spider, and Lupo the Scarred. Overall creature control, I'm going to rate it about a 5. For speed, we do have Lab Work, 2 copies of Library Babel, Sutterkin, 2 copies of Wild Wormhole, and Memory Chip. Supporting cards include 2 copies of Archimedes, the 3 Smite, and Regrowth. So overall speed, I'm going to rate about an 8. As for highlights, we do have a nice fast deck with good Amber Generation. Archimedes with its play effect creatures like Darna, Flaxia, Inca, and Lupo that we can recur, which is nice. 2 copies of Wild Wormhole, won't hit anything negative, so at most it's just going to be a loss of opportunity, like hitting Binate Rupture for nothing. 2 Darnas and Soldiers of Flowers with a key cheat this time. Last deck we talked about this combination of cards. We were lacking the key cheat. Well, here it is. So this deck's definitely going to perform a bit better. But in terms of the bad parts of this deck, we do have limited Amber Control, Artifact Control, and Creature Control. Binate Rupture without Interdimensional Grafts. and no board wipe is always a sad thing to see because those things let you catch up or turn the tables in case you're falling behind. So to summarize, this deck is a rush deck that wants to recur creatures using Archimedes' effect, so that I'm going to rate about a 60. For deck number 6, we have Hungry Jorunn of the Gauntlet. It's a Brobnar, Sanctum, and Shadows deck. For our Amber generation, we have 4 Pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Fusel, Smith's Effect, Healing Blast, Ronnie, Swindle, Umbra, maybe Brand, and Mac the Knife, totaling about 15 for Amber generation. For control, we have 2 copies of Grok, 2 copies of Abed, Ronnie, Swindle, Umbra, maybe Brand again, and Skeleton Key. So I'm going to rate that about a 9. The reason why I say maybe for Brand is because there's no immediate way to destroy him. As for artifact control, we don't have any, so it's once again a 0. For creature control, we do have 2 copies of Bramo, Flamewick Shaman, Smite, Bone Rot Venom, Scout Keeper, Mac the Knife, and Bellowing Patrazate. Supporting cards include Bingo Bang Bang, Drummerknot, Tremor, 2 Lion Boutrums, Hallowed Shield, and Shield of Justice, totaling at about an 8 for creature control. For speed, we do have Brobnar Ambassador, since supporting cards include Grey Rider and Drummerknot, so together it's still just going to be a 1 for speed. For disruption, there's a little Rapsol and Scally Caper. And other highlights, we do have good Amber and creature control. The Drummerknot with the Bramos is a nice combination to hit those flank creatures. Smith with a lot of Brobnar creatures is always nice, so that Smith should be able to hit off more likely than not. Healing Blast with decent powered creatures, that way you have a good chance of hitting that extra 2 Amber. As for the bad, we do have lower Amber generation and speed with no artifact control. The 3 Lamindras is kind of overkill, it's too many, and I wish 2 of them would have been Ronnie. Bellowing Patrazate with 1 powered creatures is a bad combination here, so the 3 Lamindras and Brobnar Ambassador could fall prey to the Bellowing Patrazate, so it's important what order you play them in. As for other combinations, Bramo and Scally Caper is anti-synergistic since Scally Caper is probably going to stay on your opponent's flank, not in between, and then your Bramo's just going to kill it instead, and it's going to be a meat shield for your opponent's creatures. There is no wipe or hard Amber control in this deck, so by hard Amber control by now I'm sure everybody understands it's things like Too Much to Protect, Doorstep to Heaven, things that really bring down any high number of Amber. There is no immediate removal for Brand, as I mentioned earlier, so that's another negative play. Overall, the deck wants to stay in control of the board, not letting the opponent's creatures stick around, but it is weak to the board wipe and slow to recover, so in that sense, it's a bit of a weaker deck that way in terms of the meta of the game, but within the AOA set, it can be a pretty decent deck. Overall, I'm going to rate this deck at 56. Moving on to deck number 7, we do have the Steel Madman. It is a Brobnar, Sanctum, and Untamed deck. For Amber generation, we have 12 Pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Blood Money, Healing Blast Effect, Mother Northel, Rustnar, and Telaga, totaling at about 18 for Amber generation. For Amber control, we do have 2 copies of Maruk, the Marked, and Double Grump Buggy, with 8 creatures, potentially up to 10 with Lion Boutrum, and maybe 11, including the Marmal Swarm, assuming you have the Amber. Supporting cards include Barrister Joya. So overall, Amber control I'm still going to rate fairly low at about a 5. For artifact control, we do have Rustnar and Grasping Vines, so that's about a 1. Creature control, we do have First Blood, Pound, Flamethrower, Smite, Piranha Monkeys to directly remove creatures, and supporting cards like Blinding Light, Potion Invulnerability, Lion Boutrum, 2 copies of Fanghouse, and Telaga. Overall creature control I'm going to rate about a 6. For speed, we do have Punctuated Equilibrium, but other than that we have supporting cards like Grey Rider and 2 Song of Springs, and Disruption in the form of 2 Tremors. So the speed I'm going to rate about a 2. As for highlights, we do have good Amber generation, board-based key control, and artifact disruption. There's big bodies for Healing Blast. There's a lot of stuns in this deck, but unfortunately no wipe. The Potion of Invulnerability is very good in AOA, especially for fight-based effects that we see in this deck. Unfortunately, the bad of this deck, we do have poor creature removal and speed, so it's kind of lacking Brobnar creatures for the First Blood to hit. The board control isn't very efficient, meaning it's mostly fight-based to remove your opponent's creatures. You can't really just play a card and say goodbye. And there's a heavy reliance on the double grunt buggy for amber control, so if there's good board control on the opponent's side or even artifact control, then you're going to have a hard time keeping your opponent at bay from forging their keys. So overall, like with any double grunt buggy deck, you're kind of expecting slow games. There's going to be a difficulty to manage without that extra bit of amber control rather than just key cost control. It's a double-edged key cost control, so if your opponent does have large creatures in their deck as well, then your deck might be at their mercy. Overall, I'm going to rate this deck at about a 57. Moving on to deck number 8, we have Anson, the Ivory Tower Scammer. It's a Brobnar, Logos, and Sanctum deck. For Amber generation, we're looking at 14 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include the Flex, Eureka for its effect, and Begone, giving us about a 20 for total Amber generation. For Amber control, we only have Maruk the Marked and Take Hostages. Supporting cards include Avon the Armorsmith and 3 copies of Protect the Weak. So overall for Amber control, I'm only going to rate it about a 2. For artifact control, we do have a Gorm of Alm, so that's a solid 1. For creature control, we have Coward's End, Pound, Flamethrower, Gargantus Scrapper, Bilgam Avalanche, Bouncing Death Quark with 15 creatures, Begone, and Vemos Lightbringer. Supporting cards include 2 copies of Blinding Light, Bingo Bang Bang, 3 copies of Blood of Titans, 3 copies of Protect the Weak, and Niflgrounds. Totaling creature control at about a 6. For speed, we have Igor, Helperbot, Hexbian, Sutterkin, Wall Wormhole, 2 ZYX Researchers, and Director of ZYX and Eureka. For total speed about 9. And the main disruption in this deck is the Seismo Entangler. As for highlights, we do have good Amber generation and speed with creature removal options. The Flex is supported by big creatures and 3 copies of Blooded Titans, so you can imagine the possibility of a 20 plus powered creature to flex. It can archive for big plays with the logo set. We have Begone in a deck that doesn't have discs, so you're not going to hit our own creatures. We have Vemos Lightbringer with only 1 elusive creature, which again won't hit us very much. Unfortunately, there is next to no Amber control, so we're essentially going to look at this as a rush deck. Niflgrounds is kind of useless as a Maverick, especially in Logos, because what are you going to fight with? Overall, this deck is a rush deck, period. Given that it's completely lacking Amber control, we're definitely going to try to race our way through this. So the idea, get a big boy out, feed in Blood of the Titans, and flex your way to victory. I just want to say that. Then you can archive the Flex with ZYX Researcher and set up for another Flex. So, you know, just put on a show with this deck, right? Overall, SAS, I'm going to rate this deck at about a 64. For deck number 9, we have Snowdon of Clouddome. It is a Logos, Mars, and Untamed deck. For Amber generation, we do have 8 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Cutthroat Research for its effect, Knowledge is Power, Mind Warper, Hypnotic Command, Full Moon, and 3 copies of Rustnar, giving us a total about 15 just to be conservative, but it has big potential on the Hypnotic Command and Full Moon. For Amber control, we have Cutthroat Research, Mind Warper, and Hypnotic Command, with support cards including Shockworm. Total Amber control, I'm going to rate about 3. For artifact control, we have 3 Rustnars and Grasping Vines, giving us a total of 2. Creature control, we have Standardized Testing and Zookeeper to directly remove creatures. And supporting cards include Heartland Mindlock, 2 copies of Collector Worm, 3 copies of Mindworm, a Shockworm, and Penpaka Jaga, giving us a total creature control of 6. For speed, we have Helperbot, Flatwork, ZOX Researcher, and Time Traveler, with supporting cards like Archimedes and Proliferator. Disruptive cards include Seismo Entangler, giving us a speed of about 6. For highlights, it has good potential generation and creature control. We have 10 Mars creatures with a key protection, which is kind of rare to see, and Hypnotic Command. That is the better card, in my opinion, to get in terms of controlling Amber for within Mars, especially when you have a bunch of creatures you could lay down before playing Hypnotic Command. We also have Full Moon with a lot of untamed creatures with Chota for a key cheat, and Time Travel is always good, right? As for the bad, it's lacking Amber control, though maybe not if, depending on how well you can keep Hypnotic Command going. So it is going to rely heavily on the Mars set here. We have competing uses for archiving between the Mars set that wants to take your opponent's creatures and lock them up forever, and your Logos that wants to archive to set you up for better turns in the future. So you have a tough choice there. And there is no board wipe, so there's going to be some difficulty catching up if you fall behind. So this deck really needs to take the initiative, especially on the board. It does rely on built-in combos. 10 creatures and Mars with the Key Abduction and the Hypnotic Command can generate prior to that. You have a Proliferator that can recur the Hypnotic Command, and you have a ZOX Researcher to bring back the Key Abduction if that's your play. You could focus on the Untamed set with the Full Moon Chotahazri with a bunch of creatures. There's a lot of options within this deck in terms of big combos you can pull off, and the Logos does a great job in supporting everything else. Overall, I'm going to rate this deck at a 62. Next, we have deck number 10, Xavyer, Mrs. Panda, Humboldt. It's a Brobnar Disc Logos deck. We have 9 pips of Amber, with supporting cards like 3 copies of Foozle, a Schuler, and Cut That Research for its effect, totaling about 15 for Amber generation. For control, we have 3 Groaks, the Schuler, Lash of Broken Dreams, and Gold Key Imp, with supporting cards like Little Rapskull, Amber Imp, and Orb of Invidious, for a total of 5 for Amber control. We have a remote access for half a point in Artifact control. Creature control, we have First Blood, Pound, Standardized Testing, supporting cards like Signifier, Amber Imp, Life Ward, and Orb of Invidious. Plenty of big creatures to fight with the Gangernaut combo, or Drummernaut with Ganger Chieftain. 3 copies of Foozle, 3 Groaks, an Old Yerk, Scullion, Schuler, Titan Mechanic. All of them are big creatures that can fight. But overall creature control, specifically, we're going to rate about a 4 to 6. For speed, we have Library of the Damned, Old Yerk, Halperbot, Library of Babel, 3 copies of Sutterkin, COIX Researcher, Research Smoko, and Sloppy Lab Work. Supporting cards include Signifier, Not Finished With You, and disruptive cards like 2 copies of Binding Irons and Life Ward. So overall, I'm going to rate the speed at about a 12. As for highlights, again, we have good speed, potential Amber generation, and a great board state if we can stay in control. We have the Gangernaut combo, and we have double Binding Irons. Those are great things to see in any deck, especially in AOA. As for the bad, we have low control in all categories. So Amber control, creature control, artifact control, all that is really low. There's no way to protect key creatures like Sutterkin and Foozle, and we don't have a wipe to catch up in case our board gets wiped or we fall behind on building up the board. The interesting pieces in this deck, we have 3 triplets, the Foozles, the Groaks, and the Sutterkins. So this is going to be an interesting deck to play. In summary, it's a quick board heavy deck that's susceptible to wipes again, but if left unchecked, it has good potential to really run the game. All in all, I'm going to rate this deck at a 58. Next, we have deck number 11. It's a Flatbattle, the Enticer Intimidator. It's a Dis Shadows Untamed deck. Starting with Amber generation, we have 15 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Tentacus, Ortanu's Bindings for Recursion, Soul Snatcher with 12 creatures, 2 copies of Furtive Investors, Gamgee, 2 copies of Nerd Blast, Sucker Punch with Recursion, 2 copies of Yangtze Gang, Brand, and 2 copies of Rigged Lottery for its effect. We have 2 wild cards as well in Merkins and Mimicry, giving me a total of about 25, maybe more, of potential Amber generation. It all depends on how many times you can recur some of these cards and how big each card hits, especially things like Rigged Lottery. For Amber control, we have Gamgee, 2 copies of Nerd Blast, 2 Yangtze Gangs, Bren the Fanatic, and Lash of Broken Dreams. Supporting cards include Tentacus, Mimicry, and Merkins, giving me a total of about 7 for Amber control. For artifact control, we have a Tentacus for sure, so that's 0.5, and then we have the Merkins and Mimicry that could be anything, which might play into this category as well. For creature control, we do have Unlock Gateway, Hysteria, the Ortanu set, 2 copies of Nerd Blast, Sucker Punch, 2 copies of Save the Pack and They're Everywhere, 2 copies of each, and Nature's Call, giving me a total of about 12 for creature control. For speed, we have Yerk and 2 copies of Rigged Lottery. The supporting cards include Not Finished With You, Glimmer, and Nepenthe Seed. There's also disruptive cards like Binding Irons, Streak, and Merkins. So all in all, speed is still just going to be a 3, looking at the first 3 cards. For highlights, we have good Amber generation and controls overall. The only thing it's really lacking is speed, and a lot of these cards can be situational. So other good things are Ortanu with Brand. We got a nice target for those chains in case, we need to steal some Amber back on this turn. We have wild cards like Merkins and Mimicry that are timeless, as you get to use your opponent's deck against them. And we have 2 copies of Save the Pack with 2 copies of They're Everywhere. That combo is always great, especially within this set where Sanctum is the only armored house. The unfortunate part is Soul Snatcher, which typically is an interesting play and it changes the game drastically. But for this deck, I don't think it's going to be in your favor. It's kind of situational though, because there are several creatures that you want to keep them on the board, and that's a way to prevent them from being killed. But at the same time, you have a lot of board wipes yourself. You have a lot of ways to clear the board. So depending on how many creatures your opponent has, this may or may not be in your favor to play. We don't necessarily want to lose shadow cards for their value in order to get the Amber on Rigged Lottery. And a lot of them have Amber Pips to begin with, but it does help you cycle faster, so that could be valuable there. And again, there is no big Amber control in this deck either, so that's another negative. But in summary, this is a solid deck with a lot of board control and really no dead cards. The worst one is maybe Soul Snatcher, depending on, and it's again situational. A Grasping Vines would have been great, so you can, bounce it back whenever you need and play it down when it suits you best. So overall, I'm going to rate this deck at a 69. Best deck yet. Moving on to the last deck, we have Tortopost, Spawn of Wallagod. It's a Logos, Shadows, and Untamed deck. For Amber generation, we have 17 pips of Amber. I think that's the highest we've seen yet. Supporting cards include Cutthroat Research for its effect, Furtive Investors, Gamgee, Little Nif, Full Moon, Rustnar, and Flaxia, giving me a total of about 22 for Amber generation, just being conservative. For Amber control, we do have Cutthroat Research, Gamgee, and Little Nif, so only 3 cards, so I'll rate it at 3 as well. For artifact control, we have Remote Access and Rustnar, giving us a total of 1. And for creature control, we have Life for Life, Whistling Darts, and Lights Out. Supporting cards include Persistent Hunting and Inca, giving me a total of about a 3. And for speed, we have Helperbot, Hexbian, Labwork, Sutterkin, Titan Librarian, Memory Chip, and 2 copies of Dusk Chronicles. Supporting cards include Archimedes and Glimmer. Some disruptive cards include Subtle Maul, Persistence Hunting, and Inca. So overall speed, I'm going to rate it an 8. The highlights of this deck, we have good Amber generation and speed. We have a Full Moon with a good number of untamed creatures, but unfortunately, again, we don't have a key cheat. But other than that, the Shadows is severely limited in Amber control, which is its job in this set. And Sullen Defense is a dead card, since we're not capturing Amber with any other card in this deck. So with that, I'm going to rate this deck at a 56. But yeah, that brings us to the end of this display. That was 12 interesting decks. We've had some triplets, we've got some nice combos in here. So all in all, a lot more interesting than the last couple of displays we've been opening. Hope you guys enjoyed this, got some value out of it, just getting some practice in rating AOA decks, just seeing what the cards, what you can kind of expect from these decks. And I'm hoping to give a more broader view of it. But at the end of the day, any deck can be good. Just play it, test it, get to know it, get the ins and outs of the deck practiced. And yeah, piloting skills are a huge part of the equation. So once again, thank you guys for watching and continuing to support my channel through viewership. If you like this video, please click that like button and consider subscribing to the channel to support it. If you have any feedback, questions, concerns, suggestions, anything, just leave them in the comment section below. And as always, be kind and happy forging.